let's get into it now. A spoiler-free movie review of Saw X, the 10th film in the franchise, from a film series that captivated audiences starting back in 2004 in one of the most mind-blowing and jarring movies of our lifetime in the horror genre. And to be honest, I have fallen out of love with the Saw franchise over the years. 1, 2, and 3, I was good. But after that, they became formulaic. And it's a hard franchise to really attach yourself to because really the format is the star. You have your players playing the game, trying to save their lives. This whole big reason that John Kramer has crafted because he is somebody who has been fighting for his life and wants to show the people who are taking their life for granted how much they should appreciate the things that they have. So really, the Saw movies are the most wholesome when you think about it, teaching us a lesson that we all need to know. We find John Kramer again. He is sick. Basically, the doctor has told him that he only has a few months to live, and they tell him to take it easy. He says, I'm not taking it easy. I'm going to go out fighting this thing. So what does he do? He learns about this experimental medical procedure in Mexico, and it's supposed to be one that can cure his cancer as far along as he is. So he travels to Mexico and then learns about this entire operation and realizes it is a scam to defraud the most vulnerable. Again, that's all in the IMDb description, so I'm not ruining anything by saying that, but that's the entire movie, is him getting back at these people who have stolen money from him. The interesting thing about this movie, it has an entirely different tone. And even in the first 20 and 30 minutes, I was worried a little bit because it spent so much time on his story, what he was going through, that it really felt like a drama that I wouldn't have hated. But I don't really go into a Saw movie wanting a drama. So it does take this movie a little bit to ramp up. And like I told you how I feel about horror movies that have really slow beginnings, it always gets me. It always feels a little bit like, all right, let's get to the action here. But once it does, I'm not going to say it's nonstop throughout the entire movie, but it is so intense when it does show these moments that I feel like they had to really step up their game in this movie to make it feel more gruesome. And I paid attention to all the little sound effects and all the blood squirts and all the practical horror elements that they use, that I found myself, a person who is really desensitized to anything bloody, anything gory. I can watch the most hardcore violent movie and not feel a thing. Coming from me, I found myself a little bit squeamish and some things were hard to watch. I have a thing about bones breaking and the sound effects they use of bones crunching and blood curdling. It was so well done and so properly used that it even made me feel queasy, that I still kept my eyes on the screen the entire time because I felt like if I didn't watch it, I would be missing out on what is happening here. But it was hard to watch, and I just found myself doing this face like, ugh, this is hard to stomach. But if you are squeamish, this movie is not for the faint of heart. And after watching this, it made me think, how has this Saw franchise become such a household name with how gruesome they are? It's just torture in every single film, and they take it to such extremes, and they're so creative that you wonder, what are these writers going through while they are thinking of all these plots? It's like a sick Looney Tunes sketch every single time. So it's just surprising to me that this has become so mainstream and we're all kind of cool with it. So if somebody says Saw is their favorite movie franchise in the horror genre, I question their judgment a little bit. I'm going to be looking into your internet history. So this movie isn't really scary. I don't think the entire franchise is that at all, but it is so gruesome, and the most gruesome I've seen this franchise in a very long time. So I think that is going to get people interested in this franchise again. But it's that connection I had with John Kramer in this movie that I hadn't really felt since maybe part 2, because for the first time, he's not a good guy. He's kind of an anti-hero. He is doing these things for arguably a moral reason, but he's also the villain too. So I found myself going back and forth in this film. Do I think he's doing good? Do I think he's a bad person? Because at the end of the day, like he says, he is not killing anybody. They have the choice, but he is just putting them in these situations where they have to fight for their life. So I found myself being so conflicted of rooting for him, but also rooting against him, because it's just hard to see people put in these situations. So I feel it from both ends. But again, in this movie, they screwed him over. So did they deserve it? I don't know. He's like a hardcore vigilante. So overall, like it is in the rest of the franchise, the format of the movie is the star. You have all of these people playing this game. I would say the only thing that really held me back from fully loving this movie, there were a couple of things. One is that the acting is pretty subpar. And again, I don't really go into a Saw movie thinking there's going to be stellar acting in this Saw film. Wasn't really the case, but it was so bad in parts that I found myself disconnecting from the story because I was annoyed by their performances. One character in particular, I was like, all right, just kill this guy because I can't stand him anymore. But maybe they were just trying to make a really unsufferable character, so not really on them for making me hate him so much. I think actually being able to write a character that invokes that emotion is a pretty powerful thing. If I left a movie feeling annoyed because of one specific character, I feel like they did their job. But man, I was waiting for it to get to his game because I wanted him out of there. I did not want him to win. I was definitely rooting against that guy because he was so annoying. But there were other interactions in this movie with different characters that felt very soap opera-ish. Not with anything with John Kramer. I think he is so great in that role. His voice is iconic in the horror franchise, but it's just his interactions with everybody else felt a little bit cheesy at times. My second issue with this movie was the runtime. I'm not against a long runtime if it has a reason to be that long, but those first 30 minutes of building his story could have been condensed a little more to get to more of the action, because that's what we want in a Saw movie. We want more blood. We want more guts. It felt like it was so slow in the beginning. I found myself being bored, and it was hard to come back from that it really wasn't until halfway through the movie that I realized I'm really enjoying this because it had me so bored in the beginning. So I worry that if you don't go see this movie in theaters and wait to stream it, you may not get through those first 30 minutes because it doesn't really hook you in. Even though it is emotional in the beginning, you do get to feel a lot of the pain that he is going through. But man, you just wanted to get to the action. And if it would have been at that 140-minute range, oh man, it would have been a much better, more cohesive movie all the way throughout. And I would be telling you, you need to go see this movie in theaters today. It did make me feel oddly nostalgic, and it reminded me of the epic music that they always have at the ending of a Saw movie. And whenever this music played, I was like, oh yes, like this kind of takes me back. So there were those moments where it felt like they were calling back to the original Saw, calling back to those early films without it feeling kind of cheap and kind of reminding the audience, hey, remember when we did that? Which I feel other horror movies do that. They just do the exact same things that they did in the early films as a callback, but it just feels like they're reminding us like, hey, remember that? That we're going to do it again. It's cool reference. Not in this case. It was more like odes to the original one, subtle nods, very subtle placement of things that happened in the first and second movie that they brought back in a more sophisticated way, in a more subtle way, that didn't really feel like they were just cramming it in there for the sake of nostalgia. So in the end, I left really enjoying this movie. I'm about 24 hours now after seeing it, and I'm still thinking about it. So that is the sign of a good movie. Also the fact that whenever you have lower expectations going into a movie, and it kind of obliterates everything you thought the movie was going to be, those movies always just stick with me and mean a little bit more to me. So if I had to rate Saw X, I would give it 4 out of 5 body parts.